Welcome to the State of the Nation. We are here today with the leader of the opposition, leader of the Democratic Alliance, Mr. John Steenhuisen. John, welcome to the State of the Nation again.
Mark, great to be with you and great to be with all the viewers as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, John, and thank you for taking up my invitation at short notice. But it seems that nobody is speaking on behalf of government. And the country is sitting here in the dark. I mean, I remember the good old days when Cyril Ramaphosa at least had the good grace to come back to the country when we were on stage 6. But this time he's here and he's saying absolutely nothing. What's the DA's take on the current problems with Eskom?
Well, I think the president's not coming on TV because they've run out of ideas. They don't know how to fix Eskom. And they know that the ideological and political meddling that has taken place has now fundamentally damaged Eskom to the point where we started the year on stage 6 indefinitely, which is a new low for us here. It's very, very clear that the country is in deep crisis. And the very first action of the president post his re-election was to place energy and our energy supply and Eskom in the hands of probably the single biggest obstacle to energy reform in the country, and that's Gwede Mantashe. And so I'm afraid to say I think things are about to get a lot worse before they start to get any better. But Andre de Ruyter will be leaving Eskom in just under 2 months' time, and obviously leaving Eskom again without strategic leadership. And no doubt a new CEO coming in is going to want a new turnaround strategy, a new board, and we're back to square one again, whilst our economy suffers terribly on a daily basis. And that not only is there inconvenience, but there's an economic cost to these rolling blackouts that are taking place. And stage 6 is devastating in terms of its impact on killing jobs, killing economic activity, and ruining the economic future of many South Africans.
Let's start off with the appointment of Gwede Mantashe, or the minister, putting Eskom in the Ministry of Energy. Clearly, Cyril Ramaphosa has got quite a big debt to repay because Gwede Mantashe was instrumental in getting him re-elected last December.
Well, it can only be the only explanation, because if one looks back at the muddy path to this devastating situation we've got to now, Gwede Mantashe's obstinate refusal to A, let go of coal, and B, to try and prevent at all costs the slipping away out of electricity provision, generation, and supply out of a government monopoly. Part of the reason we're sitting with this situation. Had we adopted the reforms required years ago, we wouldn't be sitting here. Gwede Mantashe has been one of the biggest obstacles to energy reform in South Africa, and yet now he's in charge of Eskom. And to my mind, it shows that once again, we're having the ANC and its internal matters put first instead of the people of South Africa and the country's general well-being. Why on earth would you take the single biggest problem facing the country at the moment and then put the very person who got us into the mess in charge of it? It makes absolutely no sense at all. It can only be explained by ANC politics before the country's interests and the interests of the people.
And it can be replaced, it can be explained by one other thing, and that is Gwede Mantashe's obsession with the car power ships. Do you see them steaming into our harbors anytime soon?
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult to do so because of the environmental impact that these car ships have on particularly local marine life, etc. So I no doubt that I think Andre de Ruyter had it on the money when he said very clearly that part of the reason why there is a unwillingness to move away from coal and towards renewable energy solutions in the country is because you can't steal the sun or the wind. And I think that's exactly right. There are vast networks, patronage networks that are linked to the provision of coal to substations. We know that Mr. Mantashe has a long history in the coal industry himself. And it's very clear that he is absolutely adamant that we must retain the old way of doing business and that government must retain that that monopoly in order to ensure that you can seek the maximum rents from processes. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're sitting with this crisis. Compared the situation we're in today and the response there to Thailand just under a decade ago, who ended up in a similar situation with rolling blackouts. Theirs were a result of a massive leap in manufacturing and economic growth. What a great problem to have. And what they did is went to the open market and said, we will buy whatever electricity you can produce at a certain rate. And within a year, they had an excess supply of electricity. What we're doing in South Africa at the moment is disincentivizing as much as we can private independent power producers. We're putting in the way as many obstacles as we can to home generation and business generation. And we're adopting a completely the opposite approach to other countries in similar situations have done, where they've gone to the open market to find solutions to the problem. The state monopoly system is simply not going to work. I described it earlier to somebody as you could perhaps have the best donkey in town, but if you take that donkey to the Durban July, there's not a hope in hell it's going to have of winning, because it's not the right vehicle to deliver a result. And I'm afraid we're saddled with the Eskom state monopoly donkey, when what we should be looking for is a variety of other resources to get us over the line.
Now, John, do you get a sense that in any way the ANC understands the general anger amongst the South African population? And you can listen to any phone-in show or read any newspaper. Everybody, regardless of their political affiliation, has had enough. This is beyond what is acceptable.
Well, I think there's a disconnect from what is felt of the general population. Remember, this is a government made up of ministers, all who have official residences provided by you and the viewers and all of us taxpayers, and who have had generators provided to their homes so they don't have to feel the impact of load shedding. It's the same reason they don't really give a flying whatever about crime, because they and their families are protected by the SAPs around the clock, and they're kept safe. I think there's a disconnect there where they simply exist in a different world to what ordinary South Africans are feeling on a daily basis. So they don't feel the pain, and therefore it's not a priority for them. Eskom is the single biggest crisis in South Africa because it has such an intrinsic knock-on effect to every other aspect of our lives, from unemployment to crime to job creation to economic growth. And yet I would think it would be the biggest issue keeping this government awake at night. Well, we couldn't get the president off television during the COVID-19 crisis. We haven't seen him once coming forward to give us what the solutions are to this crisis, to give us a time-bound program, and to let us know what the initiatives are that are going to be put in place so that you, I, the media, and all citizens can hold him accountable to that. He's been noticeable by his absence.
To be fair, he's probably taken with the whole renewal program, which is once again, this is the year that he's got a wonderful renewal program. So I presume that's keeping the president quite busy.
There's no renewal, Mark, and we mustn't buy that fuffy from them.
Yeah.
There's no renewal when in the top 7 you've got Nomvula Mokonyane, who is heavily implicated in the Zondo Commission report. Gwede Mantashe, heavily implicated in the Zondo Commission report. Paul Mashatile, who's left a muddy trail of corruption and maladministration in the Gauteng Development Agency when he was up there in Gauteng. It's the same old people sitting around the same old table, making the same bad decisions that have a terrible impact on all of our lives. Let's not buy the fuffy of the renewal. There's no renewal. The only thing that's being renewed, hopefully for them, as they see it, is another 5 years to loot, steal, and pillage from the people of South Africa.
Yeah, and I suppose we have to put to bed the idea that there's a better ANC or a good ANC and a bad ANC. There's only the ANC.
Well, and the president's got himself to blame for that. Jacob Zuma had Nkandla. Cyril Ramaphosa's got Phala Phala. And we still, months in now, are no clearer to knowing why the president had large amounts of foreign currency stuffed into his couch at his private residence. and why he, on his own admission, used the Presidential Protection Unit, for which you and I pay for, to pursue the debts of his private business. These are all serious questions hanging over the president now, and I think that he talks about renewal. I'm not sure what renewal he's talking about, because how is he going to, with any credibility, act against cabinet ministers and officials who are errant in their duties or involved in corruption when he himself has this pala situation hanging over his head? So the reality is, as long as the ANC has power, citizens are going to have less and less power going forward. And there's only one way to solve that, and that's at the ballot box. And that's why this next year, leading into the elections, are going to be so fundamentally important, because on election day, the power sits in the hands of the voters of South Africa, and they then can pass judgment on what has happened over this period.
John, let's stay with Phala for a second, because obviously it was the hot news going into the ANC elective conference. We saw Cyril Ramaphosa and Gwede Mantashe wield a massive amount of power to squash it, firstly in Parliament and then at the ANC conference itself. Is this matter now successfully swept away? How does it get reopened? Because it doesn't look like the prosecuting authority has any appetite to follow this.
No, it's not gone away. The president thinks that. He needs to think again. We're not finished with the president in Parliament, where we are obliged by the Constitution to hold him accountable. We've already put in an application for an ad hoc committee to be formed to delve into the matter so that we can get answers as Parliament, particularly around the abuse of office and the use of the public resource to pursue a private business interest, the own admission of a violation of the exchange control regulations in South Africa, and a misuse of a parliamentary majority, no different to his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, who used the same majority to shield himself from accountability. But the reality is there are a number of steps that are still to be taken, and we're awaiting reports from the Public Protector, from the South African Reserve Bank, from the South African Revenue Service, as well as the SAPS, and the Hawks into this particular matter. So the president is by no means out of the woods. He may have been rescued by his parliamentary majority, but the lesson he needs to know is the DA is many things, but we're also like a Rottweiler, and we never let go when there's accountability to be demanded. And that's why Mr. Zuma is facing court today, because we were not prepared to just simply let things go. There are serious questions that need to be answered, and until the president answers them sufficiently, we're going to continue to ensure that he's held accountable, because that is what we're entrusted by the Constitution to do.
The Constitution is a wonderful document to most of us, except for Lindiwe Sisulu. But the Hawks are also meant to do a job, which they've just not done. And we know that there's been a new guy at the helm for the last 4 years. He's done as little as the previous guy. What makes you think that any pressure is going to get the Hawks to do what they're meant to do?
Well, there's no ways that they can scarve out of this one. And there is a case now that's been opened. There is an investigation. The facts are now in the open realm. The president, by his own admission, on his own version of events, has clearly admitted to an abuse of power, to a conflict of interest, and to breaking the law of the Republic of South Africa, and violating his oath of office by conducting paid work while he is the president of the Republic of South Africa. These are all clear admissions and violations. So it's going to be very difficult for the Hawks to simply say they're not prepared to investigate when, on the president's own version of events, he has a serious case to answer. Look, the Hawks make a matzah pudding out of most things they get involved in, and which is why we've constantly fought for a new organization like the Scorpions to be brought back, who had a 90-odd% conviction rate and success rate. But we're going to continue to put the pressure on them to finalize that investigation. I think the public deserve answers to the very serious questions that the president has to date been very adept at dodging.
Now, John, if we look at this opportunity that the current ANC malaise offers the DA as well as coalition partners, we're heading towards a general election next year. And people are now so full, I think it's the only way to put it, with the situation in South Africa. One feels that the ANC have never been weaker than what they are now. We saw that you and Herman Mashaba from Action SA had a meeting. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it was part of a series of ongoing meetings that I've been conducting with our coalition partners across the political spectrum, parties that we are working with in various governments around the country. And we concluded a very successful meeting with the IFP, the ACDP, the Freedom Front, and one or two of the other smaller parties. And that was the culmination of those meetings. I think it was a constructive meeting. I think it's an acceptance that we have to set out very clearly the alternative. And I've been very, very clear right from the very beginning that it's no use opposition parties squabbling with each other and hurling insults and trying to undermine each other when the greater project and the broader best interest is for us to be focusing our guns and attention on the ANC rather than having to squabble in the trenches. And I think that meeting was a very positive step in that direction. It's also recognition that we've got to do better in the coalitions where we are in government, because we've now got a year to prove to South Africa that coalitions can work and that they can deliver a better result and better life and better delivery. I'm not happy with the progress we've made to date, and I think there's a general acceptance that there's a lot more to do in this year to be able to improve on the lived experience and the look and feel of what government is like under a coalition, as opposed to what it's been like under ANC rule. But it's a daunting task, Mark. These municipalities that we've taken over are in terrible shape. In some of them, we've got a very tenuous hold on power. Places like Ekurhuleni, we're running a minority government. Places like Joburg, it's a constant threat of motions of no confidence. And it's been an uphill battle. And I think we've got to stabilize those coalitions, and we've got to deliver better to people over the next year so that they can go with confidence to the polls in 2024, confident in the knowledge that there is a better alternative in South Africa.
Now, John, let's stay with the performance of these coalitions. I'm up here in Gauteng, sitting in Johannesburg. And we know that there's been some talk of problems in the city of Tshwane, and Johannesburg has never looked worse. I mean, right now, I think the roads are better in the Donbass in Ukraine. Obviously, it doesn't help that we've had a lot of rain and we've got the load shedding and so on, but it doesn't look like anybody's in charge. What is going on?
Yeah. Well, Mark, as I say, I'm not going to make excuses. As I said to you, I myself I think there's a lot more we need to do to win the confidence of people there. I would just say it has been very difficult, because when you're busy spending every council meeting fighting for your political life and to keep your government intact, it does take the eye off the ball somewhat in terms of being able to govern effectively. So if you compare what we've been able to achieve in places where we have our own majority, where there's a far more stable coalition, where you don't have this relentless notions of no confidence and people walking in and out of coalitions, you're able to deliver far better. I think the instability helps nobody, and that's why we've got to look at stabilizing those coalitions to be able to ensure that we can deliver more. I think there's a lot more we could be doing and a lot more we should be doing going into the next year, and that is certainly going to be the focus of 2023, is on making sure that those governments, the fruits start to be felt by the residents living there of government that's actually on the front foot and delivering. So I'm not going to push back to you on that. I think that you can always improve and you can always do better, and that's what we should be striving to do.
Well, all I could say is that you might be as shocked as Cyril Ramaphosa if you drove down the streets of Johannesburg at the moment. It is just diabolical. I've never seen it worse in my life.
I take the criticism, Mark, and I can assure you that we're doing all that we can to turn that around. Obviously, as I've said, it's very difficult to do so in an environment that is so unstable, but you can't be a sailor that curses the sea.
Yes.
And we've accepted governance there, and we must do better, and we will do better.
Yeah, because you did have a chance to stay out of power, even fought a legal battle to get back into power, and it seems like subsequently been about as effective as Cyril Ramaphosa.
Well, I wouldn't say we're that bad, Mark. I think that's a bit of an unfair characterization. But as I said, I think we can do better. We should do better, and we will do better. I really want to demonstrate to the people of those metros that life is better under a coalition than it is under the corrupt, kleptocratic policies and regimes of the ANC, which are the reason why many of these municipalities are in the decrepit state that they are. And we're trying to claw back from 2 decades of real mismanagement and lack of investment in infrastructure. And that's the thing about roads particularly, is that they do have a lifespan. And you can neglect them for so long, but eventually they will reach a tipping point where they're just patching them up is not going to work anymore. And you've got to go on a program of relaying, retarring, rebuilding those roads, because the patchwork quilt approach is no longer viable. And it's just a shame that municipal infrastructure across the country has been allowed to deteriorate to such a degree where a place like Durban, for instance, you're sitting with 17 out of 22 sewage pump stations not working. In places like Johannesburg, the roads have deteriorated to such a degree that it makes repairing them virtually impossible. But say we've accepted the task. We've been given the challenge, and I really hope that by the end of this year we can have a conversation where at least you'll be able to tell me that you've noticed an improvement in those roads.
Perhaps it would help if you told us at least one road that's being repaired, and then at least we could hold on to something, because right now we haven't seen a machine or a person in months. John,
well, I can ask our team up there to get you that list. I'm afraid I don't have that granular knowledge, but I'm sure there is a list, and I'm sure we can get it to you.
Yeah. Anyway, John, let's move on to, in closing, we know that these coalitions are tenuous. We've spoken about some of the small parties that destabilize it. We understand. I hear the ANC even talking about those threshold limits, which may help coalitions in future. Let's hope that gets through. One of the meaningful coalition partners has been the Patriotic Alliance. And they've been quite troublesome, changing horses in the mid-race. Do you suppose they've learned anything from the wonderful experience they've just had down in the Ditzelwertsla?
Look, I would say this, that I think they have to realize that the ANC is the party of the past. And if they want to be part of the future, they need to be on the right side of history. And if they want to be breathing life into a dying, decrepit horse and keeping it, notionally afloat, then they're going to have to take responsibility for the consequences. And this is a point I've made to Gayton and to others and to other coalition partners as well, is that we have to be the future. And we have to be able to show that we can work together, and that us working together is in the best interest of the people who have elected us to serve them. I think that there has been a backlash from the residents in places like Eldorado Park and that voted for the PA and saw them propping up an ANC side of the equation. I think there has been a backlash, and I hope that it's been sufficient to signal very clearly that the PA's voters must know that their future is more secure and more prosperous, and there's more opportunity with the DA and other coalition partners than it is with the ANC, which has been the cause that many of them are living in misery, poverty, and unemployment.
John, leave us with a final word. If you were put in charge of doing something about a power situation, what are the basic steps that could be taken in the short term that might alleviate some of this problem?
Well, the first thing is I'd get the politicians out of the way, and I'd get industry experts and professionals around the table to chart out a very clear plan forward. I would drop the ideology and the political imperatives and focus on what could be done today, tomorrow, the next week, the next month to get power back on again. And then I would make sure that there was no political interference so those people could get on and do it. I would then say to the private sector in South Africa, help us to save South Africa and secure our energy future. We will buy electricity from whoever can produce it in the country, pump it into the grid, and we will pay the tariff for that. And then thirdly, I would then open up the industry completely into a greenfield industry of renewable energy that has the potential to create new jobs, new opportunities, and new growth for South Africa, where we could end up being at the cutting edge of renewable energy across the world as we leapfrog that transition. So I think there's a huge opportunity in this crisis if the right steps are made to be able to fix it, focus on getting electricity into the grid and getting the right people around the table and getting the politicians out of the way.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us at quite short notice. We got to get you into our studio in Johannesburg. This internet line has not been great, but you've come forward, you've answered all the questions. Please keep fighting the good fight. Us poor South Africans don't know where else to turn, and enjoy stage 6 with the rest of us. I suppose stage 5 down in the Western Cape. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're shielded from 2 generally, but even when it hits stage 6, it just knocks everything out for a 6. So it's very difficult to run pump stations and that when you've got stage 6. So stage 6 is a disaster. Anything above stage 4 is very difficult for any city to manage.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from John Steenhuisen. There's a potential solution. If the ANC would come out of hiding, it would be great to hear from them. John Steenhuisen, all the best in the year ahead. And to all the places you govern, I hope that you make a difference. And thank you to everybody who joined us at the State Nation today. Please subscribe to our channel so that we can keep on bringing you great interviews like this. John Steenhuisen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the viewers.